When times grow dark and life grows mean, the hardest time.
So I will say, really no words are necessary. We all know of Ted's work. We've all some of us have been involved with it more than others. And the group really wanted to hear more from Ted and see Ted and hear Ted and really be part of what's going on, at least consider our involvement as Convergence and as individual organizations. So Ted, there's really not much I can say except we all love you and thank you for being here, and take it away.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit. My understanding is there was a little interest in this fast that I used to be on. So let me just take a few minutes to talk about that, and then I'll talk about FERC, and a lot of things that are going on now, actually, in a good way in terms of FERC. Just the fast, I was on this, ended up being 32-day fast to get Trump out of office. I'm glad that action and very much all the work that people did for months and months and months ended up with a successful result. That's definitely a really big deal. The fast was 26 days on water and then 6 days on fruit and vegetable liquids. And it was pretty effective, I felt. I have been eating now for about 6 days. I've been kind of making my way back to normal eating, pretty close to that. My stomach has been all right, and generally my health has been fine. I experienced a constant weakness all during the fast. That was the primary symptom, just really being weak. And I was mainly at home the whole time. I figure there were at least 25 mainly progressive media outlets that carried coverage of it, stories about it, which I felt pretty good about. And I have been thinking more and more. I mean, I did this during the fast itself, just about fasting as a tactic. I've done a number of long fasts going way back to literally 49 years ago. And I've usually felt that they have been effective at the end of them, and I certainly feel that now. I actually do think under a Biden-Harris administration, the tactic of fasting may well be called for and an appropriate tactic at certain points in time. But that's a much longer discussion. But I definitely am thinking about that, and we'll be doing some writing about it. So that's just a brief thing about this recent action of mine. So as far as FERC, I think people know the kind of basic story about FERC is that it's a rubber stamp agency for the gas industry, which these days is primarily a frack gas industry. But what's very good about what's been happening the last year or so is that as a result of all of the organizing and the activism directed at FERC, a lot of the local battles that I know, some of you have been very much involved with, fighting against new fracking infrastructure, pipelines, compressor stations, storage terminals, export terminals. As a result of all of that, some of the press coverage that's come with it, legal cases in the courts. We've won some victories in the courts, which has definitely been very important. As a result of all that, the Congress, the U.S. Congress, is actually starting to move on the issue of FERC. The biggest thing, one example is that a subcommittee in the House of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, a subcommittee of that House committee held hearings in the spring about FERC abuses of eminent domain, in particular, impacts on landowners, people whose property was, condemned at eminent domain and so on. And they came out of their hearings, this committee, and the research that was done. One of the key leaders of that was Jamie Raskin, who is a congressperson from Maryland, from kind of the near-in Maryland suburbs right next to D.C., District of Columbia. And Jamie did a great job giving leadership within the subcommittee. They discovered that over the last 20 years, and this has been put out publicly by this House Committee on Oversight and Reform, that there have been 1,021 applications for permits for the gas industry over the last 20 years, and no more than 6 of those were turned down. That actually was a new statistic. The statistics we'd had was that it was more like somewhere around 470 applications for permits over 22 years, and all but 2 were approved by FERC. So this is kind of some new information from this House committee. So that's one good piece of news, that there's a look being taken, a serious look being taken by some people in the House. The other thing, though, that is a pretty big deal is that if people remember, Nancy Pelosi last year in 2019, in the first few months of 2019. And very much in response to the Sunrise Movement sitting in her office, and the whole movement that developed for a Green New Deal, that was very much spearheaded by the Sunrise Movement, AOC and others. In response to that, Nancy Pelosi set up a House Select Committee on the climate crisis. And nobody who supported a Green New Deal was added to that committee of about 12 House members. They came out with a document this year, the end of June, I believe, was when it came out. It was a 547-page document, had lots and lots in it about a whole series of various legislative action that Congress could take to deal with the climate crisis. Much of it is good. And again, surprising to those of us, in Beyond Extreme Energy, the primary group I've been part of, as well as groups in New Jersey that I'm part of, fighting infrastructure, fracking infrastructure. What was surprising was that about 40 of the pages of that 547 page document had to do with FERC, had to do with specific recommendations in terms of changes to FERC reforms. And, most of them were certainly good. From our standpoint as Beyond Extreme Energy, they were not as strong as we think they should be, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But just the fact that that was included, 40 pages about FERC and the need for changes in the way FERC operated, is a new thing. I mean, there's been nothing like this in Congress probably for decades, with a real development of this focus on the need to change FERC. So those are some important, relatively new developments. Just a little bit, kind of moving back now. There has been a lot of turmoil within FERC ever since Trump came into office. There's been a lot of turnover of commissioners. Ordinarily they have 5 commissioners who make the decisions, with one being the chair. I don't know the exact number, but I think it might be as many as 6 or so commissioners who, over this 4-year period under Trump, have either resigned, or one of them actually died in office. A chairperson, McIntyre, and Kevin McIntyre, he died in office, which was maybe an omen. So there's been a lot of turmoil, a lot of turnover. One important development was the nomination of a guy named Richard Glick, who's no relationship to me at all. he was nominated, I think it's about 2.5 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, to be a FERC commissioner. I'm not sure people are aware, but the way it works, there can be no more than 3 commissioners from any one party. It's all Democrats and Republicans. There's no independents, no Greens. It's all Democrats and Republicans. And no more than 3 can be from any one party, so that if there's a full complement of 5 commissioners, you can't have more than 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, or vice versa. So that's how Richard Glick got nominated. He had to be nominated essentially as a Democrat because of there were already 3 Republicans who were commissioners. Richard Glick, ever since he became a commissioner, has had a very consistent record. I don't know if it's 100%, but it's at least 90% of dissenting on every decision that FERC makes having to do with proposals for new gas industry infrastructure. Richard Glick has opposed the approval, and it's almost always been on the grounds of the climate impacts, that FERC needs to be studying the climate impacts of the expansion of new gas industry infrastructure, and they don't do it. He is constantly critical of FERC and its processes, that it does not really do a serious investigation and analysis of the climate impacts of these gas industry projects. He's been, pretty good otherwise too. Sometimes when there are issues that are not specific to the gas industry, he maybe he's not quite as good in terms of some of his position, but generally he's been a real breath of fresh air at FERC, something very new. So that's been a good thing. One of the it's not that recent, over the last year or so, there have been very specific attacks on renewable energy in terms of FERC decisions that have been made. They have been for a while now, maybe for about a year. They've only had 3 commissioners. The Trump administration has not, done a very good job, frankly, of keeping up with nominating commissioners. And actually, they also, I think, deliberately for quite a while just wanted to leave it with 2 Republicans and then Richard Glick as the one Democrat, so that they would have this majority, 2-to-1 majority of Republicans to kind of try to advance the Trump agenda. So there have been at least a couple of major decisions that have been essentially anti-renewable energy, that have made it harder for wind and solar energy projects to be able to bid into the grid, into the whole bidding process to get contracts, to supply energy into the electrical grid. And Neil Chatterjee, who is the current chair, he has been very much a key person in those 2 major decisions that were decided by a 2-to-1 vote. So that's been bad. That's in some ways kind of different than the way FERC generally has worked. In general, they have pretty much tried to, keep the possibility of renewables kind of getting into the whole mix as far as the electrical grid and getting contracts. They've tried to keep things relatively. They call it revenue neutral. That's really not quite right, given that they, give all these permits out to the gas industry. That's not exactly revenue neutral. But otherwise, they generally have not done what they have done under Neil Chatterjee's leadership, which is to make it harder for renewables to get into the whole electrical grid. So that's definitely been a real problem, a serious issue. But the interesting thing is that Chatterjee, the chair, has also done some other things that are not as bad. They also are not as significant in terms of their impacts, but he's done maybe 2-3 things that have been, you could say, better in terms of the issue of renewables. For example, there was a conference, a technical conference in the lingo of FERC, that was held on the issue of pricing carbon, putting a price on carbon, on fuels and their carbon content. And that was something that Chatterjee supported. The other Republican commissioner, whose name is Danley, I think it's James Danley, he actually did not like at all that Chatterjee was supporting such a technical conference. The conference did happen maybe a few weeks ago. Not a lot came out of it, other than people talking a lot, from what I could see. But still, it was something other than a Trump agenda, right? So just last week, at the very end of last week, it was either Thursday or Friday, all of a sudden, the news comes out that Chatterjee has been removed as the chair of FERC. He's still a commissioner unless he resigns, but Chatterjee is no longer the chair of FERC. He has been replaced by this guy Danley, James Danley, who seems to be much more of a hardliner. And it seems that Chatterjee may be angling to run for governor. He may have of Virginia, where he lives. That's some of what I've seen as to why Chatterjee has kind of, on the one hand, been very bad in terms of these moves to shut down renewables, and on the other hand, done certain things that make him look more reasonable, like he's kind of a centrist going back and forth, and that may be why it's happening. But it was kind of a shock coming from out of nowhere that all of a sudden the White House removes Chatterjee as the chair and has this more hardline guy Danley replacing Chatterjee. So we in Beyond Extreme Energy and I'm sure other groups are going to be trying to track this down more, get a better handle. The thing about that, though, is that that may not mean very much really in any run, the short run or the long run, because now that Biden has won as the president, once he takes office on January 20th, he can, if he wants to, and you would expect he would, he can replace Danley, the new chair, with Richard Glick. Richard Glick is likely to become the new chair of FERC within 80 or 90 days. That's the likely development towards the end of January. And that will certainly be a good thing. Another thing that is almost certain to happen is there are two other people who've been nominated to be commissioners. One of them is a Democrat who used to work with NRDC, has a whole program about FERC. She used to work with that program, so she's an environmentalist from NRDC. And then there's another person, a state kind of utility regulator from Virginia, who's a Republican, who they will likely be approved during this lame duck session. So what that will mean is that when Richard Glick is chosen to be, appointed by Biden to be the new chair with this woman, her first name is Allison. I'm forgetting her last name. I'm sorry, I don't have that. I should. There will be 2 Democrats and 3 Republicans. But Chatterjee's term, the former chair, his term expires in June. So what that means is that as of June, it will be possible for Biden to nominate a Democrat to replace a Chatterjee whose term expires. So that at that point, by June of next year, there could be 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans and Richard Glick as the chair. Now that'll be a much better situation. So that's kind of like basically kind of an inside baseball analysis of FERC and kind of where things are. So it's kind of a zooey setup, a zooey situation, but all the indications are that it will get better. Exactly what that'll mean remains to be seen, but it will get better. As far as Beyond Extreme Energy, we haven't met yet to kind of look at all of these latest developments and what we think about them, and we'll be actually doing that this week. But we have been putting forward a whole different proposal. We think that the fossil fuel industry is very deeply entrenched within FERC. The whole culture is just rife with a back and forth between the industry and FERC. People work at FERC, then they go to work with the industry, and then they come back again, et cetera. It's this whole revolving door. It's very much a captured agency in terms of the fossil fuel industry. So even with some better leadership, we don't trust that this agency on a long-term basis certainly can be trusted, and we need a replacement for it. So we've been putting forward the idea that it should be replaced by an agency we call FREC, or Federal Renewable Energy Commission. And there is a document. I should have gotten this out to you all before this call. I just didn't think of it. But there's a 9-page document. We call it our legislative proposal that we've put together over the last few months, based upon a lot of work and organizing and outreach and some road shows and everything that we've been doing since last year. So we put together this 9-page document, and I'm just going to read one couple of short paragraphs. It's it's our summary statement of our proposal, and just to give you a sense of what we're putting forward in terms of this replacement of FERC. BXC is proposing congressional action to sunset FERC and replace it with FREC, the Federal Renewable Energy Commission, with an explicit mandate from Congress to play a leading role in the transition from fossil fuels to renewables, wind, sun, moving water, parentheses, no new dams, and geothermal and battery storage. And we have 5 points under that. Commissioners of this new FREC must be champions of renewable energy and free of conflicts of interest. Second point, FREC would be funded through congressional appropriations, not industry fees, which encourage corruption. Right now, FERC's entire budget comes from fees of industries that apply to FERC for permits. It's just a setup for FERC, constantly giving the industries kind of what they want, so they keep coming back with new proposals and keep expanding. So anyway, that's the second one. Third, FREC would actively seek involvement and input from various environmental justice communities, especially indigenous nations, people of color, and low-income people, communities which have disproportionately suffered from fossil fuel development and operations throughout our nation's history. Fourth, FREC would operate with transparency and active promotion of community-based involvement in decision-making as a new electrical grid is built based on renewables with storage. And then the fifth point, there would no longer be any eminent domain for private gain, no tolling, no forcing landowners into court as standard operating policy. So, we go on, from there to develop this. We reference some of the, we actually reference very specifically what this House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis has put forward in terms of FERC reforms, and we say what we think is good about what they put forward, and then we have some critiques. We have had discussions with maybe 5 or 6 congressional offices, both Senate and House members. I should say actually that this whole idea of changing FERC into FREC, the idea, there's a sign-on statement that we circulated last summer, and it's now up to 236 organizations that have signed on to it. I don't know if you all have, again, can get that to you. If you haven't, you can look at it. And we then after we got all these organizations to sign on, we then reached out to candidates running for president at the time. And we got a couple of Green Party candidates, not surprisingly, but we also got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, as well as Joe Sestak, who was a former congressman from Pennsylvania who was running for president at the time. They all supported the idea, endorsed this idea of changing FERC into FREC. So we have that's definitely helped us as we've been reaching out to some congressional offices, and we have a number of others that we will be reaching out to. So we do intend to really work this and to essentially we hope to find somebody in at least one of the houses of Congress who's willing to sponsor legislation for this FERC into FREC idea, so that could begin to get some traction and begin to get these ideas out there. I don't think we believe that it's likely any time real soon that FERC is going to be replaced by this new FREC. But we think there's a lot of very sound ideas that we have in this proposal that some people are going to respond to and support, and that to the extent we can kind of work it and build up support and interest in it, that's going to help get whatever we can get out of this next Congress in terms of reforms to FERC and movement in the right direction. So that's kind of it. I think that's my time. So I'm open for questions.
Could you talk a little bit more about Ted Glick's dissenting opinion? That was the thing that really caught my attention. I mean, he was really very tough on the agency, it seemed to me.
Mm-hmm. Richard Glick, right? He's been really very consistent. It might be 100%. There might be one or two in the couple of years that he's been there that he hasn't, basically opposed the expansion of gas infrastructure. It's always been primarily on the grounds of climate and how this agency needs to take climate seriously, and they're not doing it, and that's why he is dissenting, and though dissents are helpful when you go into court for sure. So the fact that the DC Court of Appeals, which is the appeals court that hears any challenges to FERC decisions, the fact that they ruled 11-1, about 4 or 5 months ago, ruling against this incredibly ridiculous and maddening way that FERC keeps groups who are appealing a permit out of court, sometimes for 15 months. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, the project is literally built and literally starting to operate before a group that's challenging their approval of a permit can get into court. The fact that Richard Glick has been there and that he has come out with strong dissents, I'm sure was helpful in getting such an overwhelming, decision against FERC's process for the way they do that. And they can't do that anymore. It's going to be changed. It's not clear.
Great. What's the most effective way that we can support Richard Glick?
Email Hale. The email structure for FERC is first name dot last name at ferc.gov. I think that's all it is. So it'd be richard.glick at ferc.gov. So, if you want to, let them know you're supportive, you can do that.